Let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to uncover how a totally bizarre, literally blood-soaked 4,000-year-old ritual reveals the absolute depth of God's unconditional love. And, as you'll see, it brilliantly foreshadows the Messiah. If you've ever found yourself wondering why the ancient world's practices even matter to us today, well, you are about to see a picture of redemption that will absolutely take your breath away. To get there, here's our agenda. We'll hit the lost Jewish roots, look at 7 eternal covenants, explore ancient Near East agreements, examine cutting the Abrahamic covenant, and finally, shadows of the Messiah. We're basically traveling backward in time, from modern theology straight into the harsh realities of ancient practices to arrive at a profound revelation about the Messiah that honestly changes everything. All right, Section 1, the lost Jewish roots. We're starting our journey by looking at how early Christian theology tragically began drifting away from its Jewish roots and, frankly, a Jewish Messiah. You see, after the fall of Jerusalem, the scattering of the Jewish people, and the passing of the apostles, there was this massive influx of Gentile converts. Church leadership, who were coming from cultures steeped in idolatry, began constructing what we call replacement theology. They started teaching that the Jewish people had broken their covenant for the absolute last time, and that the church was now the quote-unquote new Israel, completely replacing the old. But we have to ask, does that actually align with the biblical text? Well, look at what Dr. Dinah Dye points out here. To really grasp the Bible's true meaning, we have to completely strip away our 21st century biases. Actually, scratch that. We need to strip away our 17th and 13th century biases too, and step directly into the mindset of a culture from thousands of years ago. Yes, the Bible is timeless, but it was written in a specific language to a specific culture that was vastly different from ours. Moving on to Section 2, 7 eternal biblical covenants. Let's look at how God actually established relationships with humanity through these covenants. And the absolute most vital thing to remember here, none of these were ever designed to replace the ones that came before them. No way. As you can see, there are 7 distinct biblical covenants, and it's kind of like a building foundation. Each one beautifully builds right on top of the previous one. We start with the Edenic covenant of creation, which builds to the Adamic covenant of protection, then the Noahic covenant of preservation, with the sign of the rainbow. Then comes the Abrahamic redemptive covenant of land and blessing, the Mosaic instructional covenant giving the Hebrews a way to live holy lives, the Davidic kingdom covenant of an eternal dynasty, and finally, the renewed covenant which writes the law on our hearts. They stack, they do not replace. And this right here brilliantly illustrates exactly why replacement theology completely falls short. The Hebrew word olam, used in Genesis 17 regarding the covenant with Abraham's descendants, it literally translates to forevermore, or unending. It implies an indefinite futurity. This proves these covenants were established for all time. God's promises are continuous, they're permanent, and they are for sure not replaceable. Okay, Section 3, Ancient Near East Agreements. To really get our heads around the Abrahamic covenant, we have to look at what making an agreement actually meant in the harsh, brutal world of the ancient Near East. We gotta look through their eyes. The Hebrew word brit translates to covenant, and it pops up some 270 times in the Bible. But in the ancient Near East, this wasn't just some casual handshake over a deal. It was an incredibly serious, obligatory, or promissory agreement between two parties. It required a strict oath, a deep commitment, and a very specific concluding ceremony to permanently bind the two parties together. And just notice the stark contrast here. The pagan gods of the ancient world, they were narcissistic entities characterized by avarice, impunity, and bloodlust. Their followers didn't love them, they feared them on a deeply visceral level. But the supreme God called Abraham into a totally different kind of relationship, one built on mercy, love, and protection. His ultimate goal wasn't just extracting sacrifices, it was to bless Abraham and eventually make his descendants a literal light to the nations. So, Section 4, Cutting the Abrahamic Covenant. Let's get into the absolute most intense part of this explainer and see how ancient peoples actually formalize these high-stakes agreements. Because they didn't sign a covenant, they cut a covenant. This sequence lays out the gruesome reality of an ancient covenant ritual. First, sacrificial animals were literally cut right in half. Second, the bloody pieces were laid on opposite sides of a path. Third, and this is absolutely crucial, both parties had to walk between the pieces, swearing an oath. By doing this, both parties were in agreement, and both parties were subject to the exact same terms. This wasn't paperwork, you guys. This was a visceral, blood-soaked pledge. So I want you to think about this for a second. If one party failed to keep their end of the bargain after walking that bloody path, What do you think was the ultimate consequence in the ancient Near East?
Death. That's it. The crucial point is that by walking the path, you were taking on the penalty of death. You were effectively saying to the other party, may I be torn apart and killed exactly like these animals if I break my vow to you. It was an absolute binding pledge of your own life. You were staking your very existence on keeping your word.
Now, let's step into Genesis 15. Abraham is distressed, right? He wants a sign that God's incredible promises of land and descendants are true. So God tells him to gather the animals and cut them in half to formalize the covenant. Abraham prepares the path and waits. But then, instead of Abraham walking the path to swear his life, a terrifying deep sleep falls over him. And this illustrates a shocking historical twist. Abraham is asleep. He doesn't walk the path. Instead, God alone, appearing as a smoking firepot and a flaming torch, walks between the severed pieces. Anyone reading this 4,000 years ago would have been absolutely floored by what this meant. Which brings us to Section 5, Shadows of the Messiah. This ancient mystery leads perfectly into our final section, revealing the breathtaking implications of what God did while Abraham slept and how it echoes throughout all of human history. By walking that path completely by himself, God gave Abraham all the promises of the covenant, but he took the ultimate penalty of death entirely upon his own shoulders if the covenant was ever broken. God is outside of time and space. He knew perfectly well that humanity would fail and break the covenant multiple times, yet he still instituted it, and he accepted the ultimate penalty all alone. Just stop and think about the sheer magnitude of that for a second. The creator of the universe voluntarily bound himself to a death sentence for the inevitable failures of humanity. When we map this all out across time, we see this beautiful shadow of redemption. It stretches from the Garden of Eden, where the seed was promised to crush the serpent's head, straight to the Abrahamic covenant, where God pledges his own life. This leads directly to Golgotha, where Yeshua, the Messiah, literally pays that ancient deadly penalty on the cross. And finally, it points to the resurrection, putting a definitive end to the agony of death as the conquering king. This prophetic verse from Isaiah really connects the whole thing together. It shows how the supreme God's unconditional love transformed an ancient, terrifying death ritual into the ultimate act of mercy. Look, no other God of the nations would have ever taken the penalty of death upon his own shoulders. God knew from the very beginning that the end of this covenant path would lead to a stake at Golgotha through the suffering servant. To dive even deeper into these incredible ancient paths and the enduring promises we covered today, please refer to the original article located on our website. A link to the article is provided under the video description. Also, if you enjoyed this explainer, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to help us spread the truth of God's word to the world. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider as you continue exploring the endless depths of God's enduring love. Knowing the ancient price God paid for you, how does that change the way you read his promises today? We don't serve a God who is dead, but one who is alive, who walked the path for us when we simply couldn't. Keep seeking, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.